Sachin and Steven, it is great to have you on Notes from the Front. Really excited to talk to you about GrowSF.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Okay. We have a lot to cover as we have a very important election coming up in just a few days. And I think most San Franciscans are probably pretty familiar with GrowSF at this point because you guys have been running ads. You have created a voter guide that has gone viral and has become sort of a go to guide for San Franciscans, from what I can tell. Before we get into all of that, why don't we start with each of you giving a very brief introduction to sort of your background and the story of how GrowSF got started. Let's keep it tight though, because we need to spend most of the time on San Francisco policy and the upcoming election. Sachin, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'm Sachin. So I've been in San Francisco for about 15 years. My background's in tech. I was an engineer, company founder, and product manager at various places. And I live in the Sunset with my wife and two daughters. And we love living in San Francisco, and we want to live here for the rest of our lives.
Awesome.
And hey, I'm Steven. I got involved in politics when I moved to San Francisco in 2016. Had never been involved in politics before. Started with housing policy because I moved here and it was so hard to find an affordable place to live. And just got deeper and deeper involved over the years. I actually ran for office in March 2020 and got completely blown out and took that loss. I volunteered for campaigns for that November 2020, while we were all, confined to our homes. And uh, that was the experience that made me realize I had to leave Google and do this full time because I had such an amazing time working so hard on things that really mattered. And like that's what got me out of bed during the pandemic. It wasn't my day job. And then in April of 21, I left Google, joined up with Sachin, and here we have GrowSF.
Sachin, can you share a little bit about what got you interested in SF politics?
So about 5 years ago, my wife and I decided that we were going to raise our kids in the city. And, I never really paid attention to local politics. But at that moment, I started to dig in. And what I found was both incredibly shocking, but also gave me some hope. And so what was shocking was just seeing like really how dysfunctional the city was, just how hard it is to build housing, how we were losing police officers and public safety was becoming more of an issue. The fact that we weren't even teaching kids algebra in middle school, like it's like, oh my God, like what is going on here? But the encouraging part was that everything that's wrong with San Francisco is a policy decision. It's all based off of local elections and things or people that we have voted for. And so that's where Steve and I came together with this shared strategy of like the way we get the city on the right track is to educate voters on how the city is run, why we're not seeing, the city thrive and prosper as it should, and then to give people the information, the tools to make a better, more informed decision in local elections. And
Mhm,
that's been our focus from day one.
mhm. Okay, that makes sense. Sachin, can you then explain how that growing interest in the city and making it a better place led to GrowSF?
Sure. So, I think a pivotal moment for me was in the November 2019 election. That was an election when, I was starting to pay more attention and I volunteered as a poll worker. And in that election, Dean Preston won a supervisor seat by about 125 votes. And Chesa Boudin
Wow.
won as district attorney by about 2,000 votes. And after that election, after the result came out, people were pissed. Twitter was just an uproar of people saying like, "Oh my God, like, these people are going to ruin the city." And at that moment, I'm thinking like, well, why weren't people talking about this a few days ago or a few weeks ago to
Yeah.
influence votes? Like it's too late now. Like these are the results like that we're going to have to live with. And so that was kind of the aha moment of like, okay, the power in San Francisco does not lie with the mayor. It lies with the board of supervisors. And these people are winning by hundreds of votes. And so it's very
Mhm.
fixable. And so in 2020, Stephen and I met and we started talking about like, what we could do to educate voters. And this was during the pandemic and it was just a lot of late night phone calls. Like we didn't meet in person for a really long time.
Oh,
But
wow.
we just love the city. And, many nights we were just talking about like, the dream of what San Francisco could be, and how could we help get us there.
How did you guys meet?
Sachin and I met during the pandemic. He was getting involved in politics for the first time and talking to everyone. And everyone kept mentioning, "Oh, you should talk to Steven. You're so similar. You're really aligned." So finally, we connected, and I think our first contact was like a 9 p.m. phone call, and we had both, of course, been drinking whiskey. Well, maybe he was having wine. I was having a whiskey. And then we just vibed. We talked for like an hour and a half about the direction of the city, how we thought we could fix it. And more importantly, more importantly than our own ideas about the city, the strategy of how do we get voters the best information possible? Because,
Mm,
we both believe in people. If you have good information, you will make a good decision. And the problem in San Francisco is you got this 10-page ballot, and no working person has the time to research everything on the ballot. You simply don't. It's my full-time job when we were writing the voter guide to research everything on the ballot. And that takes a solid 6 to 8 weeks of
mm,
full-time work. No reasonable person can do that. So our goal from the beginning is do the best research, compile it into an easy to read and easy to understand voter guide, and just give that to people. And so if you look at our voter guide, it's, the majority, over 2/3 of the guide is pure fact. It's here's what the bill does. Here's why it's on the ballot. Here's who introduced it. Here's why. And all of that is useful if you agree with our ultimate recommendation or if you don't. All I want is people to
hmm.
operate on the same shared reality about what this thing does. And, take right now, Proposition A on the ballot. It will fund construction of subsidized housing and will pay for it via a municipal bond. I think it's a good policy, but reasonable people can disagree. Some people think like, well, it's really expensive to build subsidized homes and maybe we should try something different. That's a fair disagreement, but at least we agree on how the proposition works, and then we
Hmm.
can make our own decisions. That's our goal. We're
I
not
love
trying to
that.
mislead anyone. We're not even trying to change anyone's minds. We just want to make it understandable.
Love that. All right. Well, just to push on that point a bit, there were voter guides before your voter guide, right? There was like
Hmm.
the pissed off voter guide.
Hmm.
There's the Chronicle. There's Spur.
Hmm.
Um, what were some other ones at the time? And like, what did you think was missing? Like, why were none of those good enough for you to think things were fine?
Well, I'll just say this. If you write a voter guide and no one reads it, what was the point?
So do you
And
think
I'll hand it off to Sachin there. um,
okay.
You're right. Like, before GrowSF existed, there were voter guides. So we have a few problems. First of all, uh, the top two voter guides before we existed were controlled by the far left. That's the League of Pissed Off Voters and the SF Democratic Party. So they were moving a
Okay.
lot of votes, but they were actually endorsing the people that have caused a lot of the problems that exist in the city today. Right? They were endorsing the people who block housing, or who want to defund the police, or who banned algebra from middle school. And the reason why people were using these voter guides is because they have good brands, and people didn't know that they were endorsing poorly. So when we started, we had a few core beliefs that we really thought would lead to success. One is we need to build trust with voters. You can't just show up a month before an election and send a bunch of glossy mail to people and expect them to vote your way. So we
Hmm.
do a lot of work outside of elections to educate people on what's going on in the city, what our views are as GrowSF and the city that we want to see. So people can start to say like, oh yeah, I align with GrowSF. I like what they're saying and I like the direction that they're going in. Second, we focus on the issues that matter to voters. So we know right now that public safety is the number one issue for folks, and that is our number one issue. Um, and so, there wasn't an organization at the time that was focused on, quality of life of, I need to feel safe. I need the streets to be clean. I need my kids to have a good public education. That was really important to us. And third, yeah, we want to make sure we have a lot of reach. And so we create a voter guide. It's on our website. It's up, we print it out. We do it in English. We do it in Chinese. And then we mail it to folks. And then we run digital ads. So you see it on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Google. But now when you see our ads or you get our mail, you know who we are. You don't just put it in the trash or ignore it. I think
Yeah.
those things lead to a lot of people like actually using the guide and using our recommendations.
Let me just ask a couple clarifying questions there. Okay, SF Democratic Party and League of Pissed Off Voters, yeah, definitely historically both have been quite on the left, progressive. Was there a moderate or more moderate leading voter guide prior to GrowSF?
Well, there was Spur, which I don't think it's fair to call Spur moderate.
No,
I
me
think they're
neither.
pretty nonpartisan. I think Spur, their primary role is as a think tank, and their primary area of expertise is urban development. So they don't endorse on things like algebra or on police staffing or things like that, or
Got
drug
it.
policy, right? They only endorse on housing and transit. And
Okay.
that's good. We need that voice. Um,
But
but
also,
it's
let
not
me
enough.
add, they literally only endorse ballot props. So they weren't endorsing
Mm.
any candidates. They weren't endorsing the board of supervisor candidates, which, we think is the most important race in local elections.
Okay, so then it sounds to me like if I am reading this correctly, there was a bit of a gap in the voter guide market, you could call it. Not that it's a marketplace really, but okay, that makes sense. All right. So it sounds like both of you identified this and said this needs to change. There should be another point of view in the mix. Is there and now it seems like are there more voter guides now? Does Together SF do a voter guide? Or I feel like now what I'm hearing from people is they're feeling a bit overwhelmed by the voter guides. Is that an issue now, or can you speak to that?
There are more moderate voter guides with better distribution now. We
Okay.
led the charge on that and
Hmm.
showed that it was a good way to reach voters with good information. And so, obviously, other people are doing the same thing now, which is fine, great. I want voters to have more information. Um, the important thing is that the voters get unbiased information. So, I want to read just real quick an excerpt from the League of Pissed Off Voters
Sure.
about two ballot props they're doing, and it's not going to be long, just a sentence each. So, Proposition F, they call it forced drug screening for the poor. And in their opening line, Prop F is a hateful piece of tough love posturing that by Mayor Breed that would revive the nastiest and least effective aspects of the war on drugs.
Right.
Completely over the top. Then you go to
Hmm.
Prop G, this is asking the school board to teach algebra again. They say Prop G, make algebra great again.
Oh God.
Rounding out the wedge salad, we have Prop G, a pointless attempt to tell the school district how to teach math. Wait, are we living in a red state? What's with these anti-woke school board takeovers and ballot measures dictating curriculum? This is about teaching children algebra. That's how they talk about issues. And so voters, if they read that, they are bombarded with the most insane, over the top arguments. And frankly, voters deserve better. So if you go to the GrowSF voter guide, which I'll pull up in real time here, here's Prop F. Here's how we open Prop F. Proposition F, drug and alcohol treatment for city services. Proposition F is an initiative ordinance from Mayor Breed that will require drug screening and substance abuse treatment for single adults receiving cash assistance from the city. It will not apply to families or seniors. Pure facts, not over the top. Go down to Prop G. Yes on Proposition G, 8th grade algebra and SF USD math curriculum development. Proposition G is a declaration of policy, which means it's not a law. It's a statement of the city's intent to do or support something. It states it's the official city policy to urge the school district to offer Algebra 1 to students by 8th grade.
Hmm.
The difference between the tone and the information being conveyed could not be more stark. So we are succeeding in our goal of giving the best, most unbiased, most deeply researched information to voters, and then they get to choose how they vote. We don't bombard them with hyperbolic partisan statements. So I'm so proud that we have created this voter guide that is so useful and so unbiased that any voter can read, learn deeply, really what's on the ballot, and then make their own choice. And I think no one was doing that before us. That's what we brought to the table.
Just to add to that, we do a lot of polling to understand where voters are and what issues they care about and, the direction that they want to see the city go in. And the voters align generally with what GrowSF wants, right? We want a city that's growing, thriving, and, we have all the resources to be the greatest city in the world. And so that means that if we just put facts out there, like Steven's saying, then people are going to vote along the lines of what we recommend. And that's all we need to do. And the other side, the far left, they know that they are on the wrong side of voters. And so they cannot talk about the issues, because if they talk about the issues and what they want to see, they will lose every time. So the only thing that they can do is resort to this hyperbolic language, or to resort to attacks, or resort to lies.
Yeah.
And, we're really proud to say we've been around for 3.5, almost 4 years, and we have not ever lied. Everything we put out there is fact. Of course, we have our recommendations, which, people are, it's fine if someone disagrees with our recommendations, but we've never put something out there that we won't stand behind.
Mhm. That's very moving what you guys are saying about, I mean, just sort of being this voice of the people is sort of what I'm reading between the lines here. I did check out your recent poll. It's beautifully done. The graphics, it's extremely easy to understand, and the takeaways could not be more stark. I think it might be, I mean, the one that really, like, the stuff that stood out to me the most was the voter sentiment on crime. The two stats that are sort of swirling in my mind are, one, that 25% of San Franciscans reported being a victim of crime in the past year, which was astounding to me. Now, granted, maybe people who've been a victim of crime are more likely to answer a poll question. I don't know. They're feeling more jazzed up, but still, that's a really high number. And I trust that I think you had worked with a firm, and I saw at the bottom that you have all the sensitivity analysis. So I trust your methodology. That 25% number is just jarring, to think that 1 in 4 San Franciscans has been a victim of crime just in the past year. And then the other number that really stood out to me was the percent that want the police to be fully staffed. I think it was something like 66% of San Franciscans, or maybe
75%.
75. Okay. There was a different 66 number. I forget what that was. Something
Yeah.
maybe.
66, I think, is to double the size of the police
Oh, yeah,
force.
yeah. To double the police force, which is just astounding when you think about, summer 2020, the average sentiment in San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco
Yeah.
was very on the defund train. I mean, San Francisco did defund the police, right? I believe the city took $100 million out of the police budget and put it towards the African American community. I don't know if that's still continuing, like if that's an annual thing, but the city did defund. You see now this extreme backlash. And I know it's one of your top priorities. Let's talk a little bit about crime in San Francisco. What are these crimes that are impacting a quarter of San Franciscans, and why has public sentiment changed so much so quickly?
Those are great questions. I want to start with a brief comment about the methodology of the polls.
Mhm.
So, the way we run the polls, we work with this firm, FM3. They're a highly regarded firm that runs public opinion polls for organizations across the political spectrum. They don't have an ideological bias. They work with everyone. And we trust them because we have seen their polling and in the past, and we've seen election results. And we're like, okay, wow. They said this is how people thought, and it matched how people voted. So clearly, their methodology is sound. So the way they recruit people for the polls is they make phone calls, they send text messages, and they send emails. And of course, they don't tell you ahead of time what's on the poll. So for the for the 25% of people who said they were a victim of crime, they didn't know that they were going to be asked about crime when they got the poll outreach. And
Got
so
it.
I don't think that there's a bias in there. There is, of course, some built-in bias with any public opinion poll because, you know, even pollsters will tell you this, like the kind of person who answers a poll is different in some regards compared to a kind of person who doesn't answer a poll. But it is the best way that we know of, that the industry knows of, to figure out how people think. So
Mhm.
with that out of the way,
Can I just jump in on one thing
yeah,
though? Because this
Yeah.
goes back to the, you know, us being focused on issues and having public opinion on our side. When we put out our polls, our opposition will come out and they will say that our poll is fake. They will say that our methodology is incorrect. They will say that you can't trust these numbers. And it doesn't matter how many times we can point them to the company that ran the poll, the methodology, literally the Wikipedia page for statistics. And you're like, this is how math works. Like, this is an accurate way to understand the population of San Francisco and where they are. But they cannot accept that. And so they just lie.
yeah, yeah. It violates their partisan narrative. And so they reject reality rather than update their understanding of the world.
Welcome to the power
Yeah.
battle. Okay, so let's talk about crime. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Steven, why don't you
Yeah.
kick us
So
off on some of sharing some of your thoughts on those numbers and what's going on?
sure. I'll say we were also shocked at these numbers. Like, I to see that 1 out of 4 San Franciscans had been the victim of crime within the past year was just astonishing. The margin of error is 4.9%. So to hear that, you know, anywhere from 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 5 people experienced crime was just shocking. And then to have half of those people not report that crime to police was another completely astonishing statistic. But if you think about your friends, if you go down to the anecdote level, you're like, well, that makes sense. I know 5 people who had their cars broken into and none of them reported it to the police. That's a crime.
Right.
That's an unreported crime.
Yeah.
So the official statistics are wrong because they don't account for unreported crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important realization. Not only shows that San Francisco has a unacceptably high property crime level, but that people have lost faith in law enforcement and the ability to fight crime.
Mm.
Those are extremely worrying. What's it called? What's the word? I'm losing a word here.
Learned
Those are,
helplessness?
well, those are extremely worrying flags pointing towards a dysfunctional society. We have to
Mm.
fix it. The basic social contract we have with government is we pay taxes and we get safety, right? At a fundamental level, that is the origin of government. And then we've added things like education, healthcare, et cetera. But without safety, a government that can't provide safety is illegitimate by definition and
Hmm.
must be fixed or replaced.
So, okay, so it's clear there's a disconnect between what people actually want and sort of the current situation and the narrative on what people want. Can you speak a little bit more about any other major insights you had from the poll that were surprising or insightful that is worth putting out there?
Sure. I think there are 2 real headline statistics that stand out. So, one of the questions we asked in our latest February poll was, do you support or oppose funding the police so San Francisco can hire 500 more officers and have a fully staffed department? 75% of San Franciscans said yes. And that is true across racial lines. Every single ethnicity that we polled uh, said the same thing. The lowest support was Latino voters at 71% saying yes. So in
Mhm.
every ethnicity, we have a supermajority. And then we followed that up with another question, which was kind of wild. We said San Francisco currently has about 1,500 police officers. If the city were to adopt staffing levels similar to other major cities like Paris, we would have 3,600 officers. Do you agree or disagree? We should try to match that number. 65% of San Franciscans agreed. That's 65% of San Franciscans saying we should more than double the size of SFPD.
Oh my God. Wow.
Now I hand it to Sachin to go in on policies, etc.
I think one of the interesting things to talk about with police staffing, like, we always talk about funding the police department and whatnot. We actually do in our budget have funding for police officers. The issue that we have is that we can't actually hire people to be police officers
Mm.
in San Francisco.
Yep.
And, there's a number of issues there. One is, of course, why would you want to be an officer in a city like SF that's where it's a really tough job, where, you can maybe get a job in a suburb, smaller town that, you don't see as much crime. But the other issue is that if you're hired by SFPD, you get a signing bonus of something like $5,000. But if you're hired in Alameda, or Redwood City, you might get a signing bonus of $75,000. And that might help you, pay down some loans or buy a house. And so we're just not able to compete with these other cities. And so one of the things that we really need to invest in is programs to increase funding for police hiring and retention. And that's one of the things that's on the ballot this election.
Hiring bonuses are?
Okay, and sorry, I want to take that back because the way I framed it, it's going to make it sound like it is, but they tricked us. So let me just back
Yeah.
up. So in this election, just to bring it back to our voter guide, um, Supervisor Dorsey attempted to put a ballot prop, to put a measure on the ballot to create a fund to do that. But his legislation was actually hijacked by two other supervisors and edited to basically neuter it to the point where it's not going to do anything. And that's Prop B. And so Prop B, our opponents are out there straight up lying. They're saying Prop B is going to fund the police. Prop B is going to help us hire more police officers and keep you safe. When it is factually true that Prop B is not going to do those things. That Prop B is not going to create a fund because it has no mechanism to actually get any money. And the way it's written, Prop B says we will only have money to fund police hiring and retention if a future tax is passed by by voters, which is not going to happen. So this is an example of just getting factual information will make it clear that you should vote no on B, but the other side is just going to lie.
How did they overtake that bill? Like, when you say they neutered it, how does that happen?
So basically, when a supervisor proposes legislation, it'll ultimately get voted on by the 11 members of the board. But before it gets there, it goes to a committee. And so this legislation went to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee has 3 members, and that's Matt Dorsey, Shimon Walton, and Asha Safai. And to pass out of Rules Committee, you need 2 out of 3 votes. And so in this case, Asha Safai and Shimon Walton had the votes to vote for the amendment that they wanted, and then vote for the overall legislation to get it to the full board. And so at that point, even though Matt Dorsey was the original author of the legislation, he took his name off of it. And he said, this doesn't actually achieve the goal that I had to begin with, so I want no part in this. And so it just shows, again, the power of the Board of Supervisors, the power of these even smaller committees, the power of the board president who creates these committees. That's Aaron Peskin right now. We end up in this world where a lot of power just comes down to one or a few people, and the people who have the power are not investing in public safety and other things that voters care about.
And you might reasonably ask, well, couldn't Supervisor Dorsey just introduce another go at it? So the answer is no, partly because of what Sachin was saying about the committee, but also because since this is a charter amendment, so that's the city charter, it's basically our constitution. A charter amendment needs 6 votes from the Board of Supervisors to get on the ballot. And we don't have 6 reasonable people on the board currently. That's why our strategy is get reasonable, common sense people on the Board of Supervisors to prevent this kind of run around against good policies.
So there's 11 supervisors, correct? 11 supervisors. 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 11 supervisors.
Hmm.
How many do you think are
That's right.
reasonable?
At most 4. Okay, no. Let me say at most 5.
Mhm. Mhm. What do
Uh,
you think, Sachin?
Sachin, you're making a face.
I'm surprised that you went to 5. I would have said barely 4. Um, but I do
Mhm.
wanna mention that, so if you back up 2 years ago, of the 11, we only had 2 reasonable supervisors, and in 2022, we were able to gain 2 seats. So that
Yep.
was a huge, huge improvement, from where we were, and this November, 6 supervisor seats are up for election. Um, and we need 2 common sense pro-growth supervisors to then have a majority. And then we will see massive improvements to the city.
Yeah, what I'm sort of hearing through the grapevine is the, balance of power could really shift this upcoming November back to moderate. And this,
Mhm.
historically, I grew up in San Francisco. This is a forever power battle, from what I can tell. At least for a long, long, long time, there's been shifts between more progressive, more moderate. Now, as a reminder, moderate in San Francisco is probably viewed as left wing by the majority of the country and viewed as right wing in San Francisco.
Mhm.
I know that you guys are getting attacked as right wing. I get attacked as right wing. Uh, do you wanna talk a little bit about the attacks you're getting and sort of what are the arguments against you? I mean, I think it is worth mentioning there are I mean, you're definitely ruffling feathers, and there are a lot of people who are upset about what you're doing. Do you wanna speak to that at all?
Well, I think I'll start by saying, I actually don't think a lot of people are upset by what we're doing. I think a small vocal minority of people don't like what we're doing because there are a lot of people out there who are NIMBYs. They don't want to see housing production in the city. There are people out there who don't want to see job growth. There are people out there who hate the tech community, even though the tech community is doing so much to bring value and jobs to the city. Building companies are literally saving lives and like innovating, so we can like, solve climate change and whatnot. So yeah, if those 10% of people, like, hate us, that's fine. Like, I'm not gonna change their minds, but most people want a
Yep.
reasonable growing city.
Yeah.
Um, and so, for me as someone who, like, really was not involved in politics before GrowSF, you might think like, "Oh my god, like, how can you, like, deal with these attacks, and, like, isn't that, like, scary?" I'm like, It just doesn't hurt me, it doesn't bother me because they're baseless." They have nothing on us. Like, we are so transparent in who we are. We are Sachin and Steven. We, work on this like nonprofit together. We publish a voter guide. I'm raising 2 kids here. We are who we are. We are more transparent than all of our opponents. Who is the League of Pissed Off Voters? Who is funding them? Who writes their voter guide? No
Right.
one knows. So they're the
Yeah.
shadowy organizations. And as long as we're honest, transparent, and authentic, we're gonna keep growing and we're gonna keep winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that you're getting some pushback on your funding. I do think we should talk about that. I wanna make sure I'm correct here, so please, keep me honest. From what I understand, there are some Republicans in town who have donated to GrowSF, and I think that a lot of people have a major issue with this. They think it's dark money. This is the big term that's used. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you think about it?
I do not believe we have any donors that are major donors that are Republicans. Now, like if
Interesting.
someone
Okay.
goes to our website and they put in their credit card and they donate $100, it's not like I'm checking everyone's political affiliation to know like, where they are. But
Mhm.
overall, we have 1,200 unique donors that have contributed to GrowSF. So we're really proud of that. It's really a grassroots effort. People of all walks of life, all income levels are donating because they care about the city. Um, and yeah, our major donors are just people who they've had some success and they want to help the city get back on track, and we're proud of that. Most of our donors are public. We don't shy away from sharing who our donors are.
Mhm.
You can look them up; they're in public filing records. Like we run a political action committee. You cannot do
Yep.
election spending without disclosing who's donating to you. So
Mhm.
we actually have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All these attacks about dark money fundamentally misunderstand what dark money is. It's not dark money if it's literally public. You can go to a state run database, you can go to a city run database and look up all the donors to our political activities. It's 100%. public and transparent. So
Mhm.
they say dark money because they're trying to build this narrative. Going back to what we said earlier, their ideas are unpopular, so they have to resort to a tax. They can't talk about the issues, so they try and make people distrust us by lying to them. So, people are going to lie. We can't stop them from lying. All we can do is focus on giving the voters the best information we can.
Mhm. Mhm.
Actually, I want to say one more thing.
Mhm.
There's this new group, the Phoenix Project.
Yes, that's what I was referring
They
to.
they claim to be uncovering all this dark money. You know what they're doing? They're going to the publicly available filing information and getting data that anyone can get. Again, totally, literally not dark money. And then they're putting fancy graphics on it and like putting their hyperbolic statements around it and then publishing it like they've got this incredible scoop. Meanwhile, they are literally a dark money group who doesn't disclose any of their donors. They're doing the exact thing they're accusing us of doing that we are not doing. It's the level of mental gymnastics and mind fuckery involved in this is just, I can't even just, I can't wrap my head around it.
Well, one
Yeah.
funny thing that's happened in the last day, I guess, it's like a couple of donors have tweeted like, I'm not a billionaire, right? Because that's their attack, or they're all these
Right, right,
billionaires,
right,
and
the
like they're
billionaires,
sitting
I
there like,
know.
I'm not a billionaire, and so it's just funny how like they're just so often like making these like false attacks, but also the fact like donors to us and other groups that are doing good work, they're proud to be publicly disclosed. They're like, yeah, I'm a donor to GrowSF. Like, what of it? Like we're just trying to do good things for the city. So I mean,
Yeah,
there's
and
nothing to hide here.
they, and they have not shared where their funding comes from. I know that, um yeah, it's a very interesting doc that they just released. I got it a couple days ago. I mean, I have it open here. So this is the part that I would like to
Mhm.
understand. So they have a list of all these conservative donors who have given money to neighbors for SF, right? So Will
Mhm.
Obendorf, Christian Larson, John Atwater, Christopher James, they're talking about, oh, this person gave to Jeb Bush in 2016, or this person gave to Bush in 2000. So I guess in some sense, if neighbors for SF is giving you money and they're giving money to neighbors SF, then technically people that supported Republicans there are those people who are your donors, correct? Where the money flows from them.
I think first of all, I'm not sure people like Chris Larson are Republicans. I'm not sure
Yeah,
really where they're getting that list from, or what, if I really believe their information on who's what party affiliation or what they stand
Right.
for.
Right.
yeah, I'm pretty
So
sure Chris is a registered Democrat.
Yeah, I have
yeah,
actually seen him behind some things that are very, very far left, if I remember correctly,
Right.
yes,
on criminal justice
Yeah.
reform.
yeah,
I think he was a major
and
donor of Chessa's.
that is right,
I mean, it shouldn't really matter, right? But this
right,
is their argument. They're saying
sure,
these people gave money to people that were not Democrats, right? They're not part of the tribe, I think is kind of the TLDR there. Like people who are not a part of the tribe gave money to this group, and then this money gave money to this group, and that's the issue. I think it speaks to how tribal and partisan San Francisco is. I also think this is part of the big issue is that San Francisco, anything that is considered in any way tangential to conservatives or conservatism, God forbid you gave to to Bush in 2000, now it becomes an issue 24 years later. You're not like anything that you touch is considered dirty. I mean, this is, I think, part of the mentality that has created part of the problem in San Francisco is people are so afraid to speak up and say anything that could be considered conservative to give. I mean, it's like, what is it? It's sort of like the modern day. I don't know what to call it, but it's extremely tribal, and I think it's very destructive.
Well, I think that, not just about money, but in general, the far left did a good job for a while of silencing normal people from speaking up about the issues that were
Yeah.
affecting them. A few years ago, you couldn't say, like, I don't feel safe walking on the street, or I want more police officers. Like, you would get attacked. And I think things really have changed the last few years where, like, normal people are just starting to say normal things about how they feel. And then they're looking around the room, they're like, wait, all of you think that too? Oh, this is great. Right. Like, I didn't realize, like, we all feel like, we need to invest more in public safety and these things. And I think that political donations coming back to the money is also part of that, right? I think a lot of people generally weren't involved in politics before. and especially not necessarily donating money. And now they're realizing like this is important, right? Like if I live in San Francisco, I can't just ignore politics. Like I need to get involved. I need to participate. And number one, that's through voting. But also, yeah, if you can, it's through donating. And you shouldn't be
Mhm.
ashamed of that. Like, we do raise money and we spend money to advertise our voter guide and our endorsements. But in probably every election that we've played in, we've been outspent by the other side significantly.
Mm.
So they try to pretend like we're spending all this money when they are in fact spending more money than we are. But our message resonates because that's where voters are.
When you focus on just running on issues rather than identity, you're able to actually speak to what voters care about. So to 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 extend what Sachin was
Mhm.
saying about spending less than the other side, let's look at the election for Joel and Gardio in 2022. The main donor supporting Joel and Gardio to GrowSF was Chris Larson. He was the
Mhm.
biggest supporter of Chesa Boudin. I didn't like Chesa Boudin. We helped with the Chesa Boudin recall, but that doesn't matter because what matters is that Joel and Gardio had the right ideas for his district. And Chris saw
Mhm.
that and we saw that. And like, it didn't matter who he had given to in the past or how we had endorsed on past elections. The only thing that mattered was voters said they want this and Joel would deliver it. So that's the only thing that matters. I don't care who you donate to. I don't even care what you think. Like what I care about is giving voters what they're asking for.
Yeah. I think we're getting close to a point where we can wrap. I would be curious, just to sort of finish this conversation on the funding. Are you able to share sort of how much money you've raised or deployed? Are there any numbers that you feel comfortable sharing that would just sort of put into context the scale of the organization? How many people work there? I assume you guys take salaries. Anything that you think would
Sure.
be helpful as people just get a sense of like how this all works.
Yeah, so we operate as a 501(c)(4) nonprofit and a political action committee. So on our not in our nonprofit, we've got me, Steven, we've got a couple other part-time employees. That's about it. We're pretty small and lean. So our budget there is, call it $700,000 a year for salaries and operations.
Hmm.
And then we have our political action committee, which spends to get our endorsements and voter guide in front of folks. And for this election in March, we're spending about $800,000 in total across our mail and digital programs. And then we're going to run a big program in November as well. And it'll probably be, around that order of magnitude, maybe a little bit more money. Um, but that's it. And we're very capital efficient. We do everything in house. We design our own mail, we design our own ads, we run our own ads. We're very data driven, so we understand what ads are converting and working. And we're just trying to again reach voters with honest, accurate information, and
Hmm.
and that's all we do.
Are you mailing the actual voter guide to people's homes?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay,
we
and so
mailed.
how many
Sorry.
people received that?
I mean, everybody
Oh,
effectively.
everyone. Yeah.
The whole
Mhm.
town?
Yeah. Well, for November, last November, yes, everyone got it. For
Okay.
this one, because the election, like it's unusual because the biggest thing on the ballot is a race that only Democrats can vote on. So Democrats got the version of the voter guide that included that information, and non-Democrats got the version that didn't have that information because
Mhm.
you shouldn't like that's not useful to them. They can't vote on it. It would just take up space and increase costs. So we don't do that, right? We always try and constrain costs because we try to be as efficient as possible. And so, yeah, we sent it to, I think, almost everyone. We did run an experiment this cycle. So we did a holdout because we want to understand, uh, does this move people, right? Does it increase
Mhm.
turnout? Does it change behavior? And interestingly enough, we might be the only local organization that is doing those kinds of data-driven experiments to figure out, is this a good way to spend money? Is this helping voters get good information? We built and ran all these experiments in the past 6 months and doing all this fancy statistical analysis. You know what we found out? Voters want safe streets and clean streets and good education. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. So that's what we're going to keep working on, because that's what voters tell us they care about.
Right. And cheaper rent.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Cheaper rent as always.
Um, what's performing well online? Like, is there like a keyword that's really performing for you guys, or any tidbits you can share?
I mean, I think at a high level, the main thing is just talking about outcomes. Like, we want to elect people who care about how the city's run, and it's not about ideologies, but it's about, getting things done. And that's what we put out there. Like, we've elected a lot of people in the past that aren't doing the job. So we need to replace them.
Sorry, let me
Yeah.
rephrase that question. When you look at your digital ad spend, what is getting people to the guide?
There's
Like,
no standout keyword that I recall. People search for voter guides. They search for, the names of ballot propositions. Sometimes people just search election,
mm,
and um, our goal is that anyone who's looking for information can find it easily. So,
mhm,
yeah, again, I'm not recalling that there's any standout top performing keyword. We don't do anything shady. We just okay, if you're searching for the election and you're based in San Francisco, we'd like you to see our voter guide because we
mhm.
think it'll be helpful. But yeah,
Maybe
there's not a standout keyword. But yeah, Sachin.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe one thing, this isn't maybe specific to like the digital ads, but an area that people are looking for a lot of information on is the DCCC election. So that's the leadership of the Democratic Party of San Francisco. So we're voting on that in March, and it's a race that most people have never heard of, and they don't know what it means. And so we're doing a lot of work to educate people on that. So briefly, the San Francisco Democratic Party is an elected body that we elect, and it does a few things, but the most important thing it does is it makes endorsements for other candidates and ballot props.
Mhm.
So right now, the SF Democratic Party is led by far left progressives, and they have made really bad endorsements. So they have endorsed Connie Chan, Dean Preston, Chasey Boudin, and the reason why this is important is if you are a voter in San Francisco and you're on page 8 in these like on the local races and you're like, I don't know how to vote. I don't know who these people are. Let me go and see who the Democratic Party endorses because I'm a
Right.
Democrat and I'm just going to follow that guide. But you don't realize that that guide is actually pointing you to these like incompetent, degrowth people. So in this election right now, the most important race is the leadership of this party. And so we've endorsed 24 candidates. There's 14 on the east side, 10 on the west side. You vote for all of those. It's the SF Dems for Change slate. And if we can, elect some of our candidates into this body in this election, then hopefully for the November election, the SF Democratic Party will endorse supervisor candidates that want to see more housing being built, and they want to, uh, invest in public education, and they want to support businesses, not kill businesses. And so, make sure right now that you vote in this election. It is very critical.
I'm so glad you brought that up because the most recent episode in Notes from the Front was with someone running for the DCCC, Lanier Coles. And something
Yeah.
that we missed in our conversation that now a few people have asked me about is, well, how much does this organization really matter? How much of the vote do they actually influence? Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, they're highly influential. Our analysis shows that they move about 14% of the electorate. So just getting that endorsement from the Democratic Party gives you a baseline of like you're going to get at least 14%. Um, Obviously 14% isn't enough to win, but we're talking about elections that are decided by 150 votes out of a
Right.
500,000 person voting pool. So 14% is a huge, phenomenal landslide victory. And they've been endorsing people like Dean Preston and Aaron Peskin and Connie Chan and Hillary Ronan, all of whom want to defund the police and fight development and push out jobs and get rid of not allow housing. Like they are degrowthers with a decel mindset to to and we have to stop electing them, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, to wrap us up, I want to ask you guys, if you were mayor and you had a genie and you could ask it to do three things for San Francisco, what would they be?
Okay, I'll start. So this is assuming that you have total control as mayor, or the genie has total control. Is that
Genie has
right?
control.
Okay. So, um, first of all, I would restore the executive authority that Aaron Peskin has eroded from the mayor's office and make it a city that is governable, because the mayor the mayor is held hostage by the board. The mayor doesn't actually have much power. It's controlled by the board. So I would fix that. Um, I would get rid of all discretionary permits and instead create a city of laws rather than a city of men. Uh, I, I, it's my belief that government should adhere to laws and not open up avenues for corruption. But San Francisco's city charter is littered with opportunities for corruption, which is why, FBI has been investigating and arresting so many people. So get rid of discretionary review, discretionary permits, have a city ruled by law. Um, and I would reduce the board of supervisors to a part-time job,
Hmm.
because they're the role of the board of supervisors is to pass laws and do constituent services. Is passing laws for a city of less than 1 million people, is that really a full-time job? You know, at some point, maybe we have enough laws. Maybe we need to do
Hmm.
a better job running the city and responding to the needs of its people instead of passing yet another law. So I think that would attract people who have more real world experience and who have maybe worked for a living rather than career politicians.
I believe it used to be a part-time job, right?
I believe so. I don't know
Before the
when it
80s.
switched. I want to say like the 1920s, maybe the 40s, but
I think it was
and
much
maybe it was more
later.
recent.
I think it was
Okay.
part-time. I remember because I was doing research on the salaries. I'll follow up and put a note in the show notes on
Okay.
this, but I think that the salaries got bumped up. I think they're still, I mean, they're not so high. When you look at a city
No.
where overtime
Yeah.
cops and bus drivers are making 400 or 500K, if they are doing a bunch of overtime, I think the supervisors make around 150. And I know that that used to be very low. I think it was more like the 80s that it became full-time, but I'll
It
put a
was
note.
it was definitely before the 80s, because I know
Before the 80s?
Dianne Feinstein, when she was a supervisor, I believe that was a full-time job. And that was 1978. At least I forget exactly when she was elected, but I remember she took a really important vote in 1978 that downzoned the city. Which, interestingly enough, the city economist said this is going to raise housing prices, and they did it anyway. And sure enough, um, I would say it's probably the 40s, but yeah, I
Hmm,
would have to do the research as well. Sachin,
when was
what
it
would
a
you
part-time job?
do?
Yep.
So I think Steven definitely hit on the big ones, right? Like that's what we need to see to have San Francisco function well. Maybe just to put a different lens on it, I think that San Francisco could be one of the best places to raise a family. Right now, it is known that it's hard to raise a family here, and families leave, once they have kids or kids are going to school. But if we fix a few fundamental problems, like how amazing is it to raise your kids in an urban setting with public transportation, one of the best park systems in the world, and so much diversity, culture, food. I mean, we love it. So, what are a few things that, someone could do to help there? So, one, yes, like we got to build more housing to bring down housing costs so that more people can afford to live here. And that includes teachers, police officers, baristas, like you name it. You should be able to live in San Francisco and raise a family here. Number two, we should have the best public schools in the world. Like, this is the tech capital of the world, right? Like, we are building incredible companies. We have incredible universities around us. We should be starting young, kids once they're like in kindergarten, from there on, training them to be the leaders and innovators of the future. Um, so we need to do that. And then the third, for me personally, especially more recently, having two small kids, it's around transit and pedestrian safety. Like, I want to be able to safely walk around the city, bike around the city with my kids. And right now, I don't feel like I can do that. Police are basically not enforcing any traffic laws. People are speeding, blowing through stop signs, ignoring red lights. You really have to be alert if you're out, not in a car, and that needs to change. Um,
Mm,
but I think the overall framing is I want people to say, "I'm going to raise my kids in San Francisco." I want more people to do
mhm.
that, and that would be a top goal of mine.
Yes, well, the city, both now and in the past, has a low number of children per capita compared to other major cities. I think that some of the stats that are sort of jaw-dropping are things like, I think the city has more dogs than children. And I also believe there are more I remember this from many years ago, there are more intravenous drug users in San Francisco than high schoolers. Um, I think there's like the estimate is like about 20,000. Yeah, so yes, I would say probably housing costs are the biggest part of that, but also the schools. And that's long, but long time issues. All right. So a lot of issues to solve, a lot of problems. How optimistic are you that things are about to turn around on a scale of 1 to 10? And then we'll wrap. 10
I
being
am
highly, highly
so
optimistic.
I am so optimistic. I'm a 10 out of 10 optimist. I think I think we are a couple elections away from fundamentally changing the direction of the city to get it back on track and to build a city that makes room for new immigrants, new families, has the best schools in the nation. All we got to do is vote for some better people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a 10 out of 10. Um, I agree. A couple more elections, we're going to get some good leaders in place who are outcomes driven, and they're going to get the city back on track. I want to share one poll number. We a lot of polls ask, do you think the city's on the wrong track or the right track? And this number has been going down for a while. And the last time we polled, it was something like 68% think the city's on the wrong track. So it's not a good number. But we asked a follow-up question that was pretty unique, I think. And we asked, do you think that the city can be fixed? And 86% of voters said that they think it can be fixed. That's incredible. And it shows that, the people who are here, they have hope. And I think that's just critical, right? If you have hope and people are willing to get involved, pay more attention, vote intelligently, then it's a done deal. Like, we're gonna fix the city.
I love that. All right. On that note, I think we can say that's a wrap. Thank you both so much for joining and sharing so much information, your personal views, the history and story of the organization. I personally find what you're doing very inspiring, and I think a lot of other people will as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. We had a great time. I really appreciate you putting this together.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this episode inspiring or interesting or illuminating in any way, and you want to share it, you can find links to the Spotify, Substack, Overcast, YouTube, and Apple versions of this piece in the show notes. Additionally, if you have any feedback and would like to share your ideas, please feel free to email me. I'm Michelle at notesfromthefront.com. All right. Thank you so much.